So, we're talking about the pyramid at the end of the world. And I suppose, starting off with some context, this is a Peter Harness episode. And, I don't know, I feel like my thoughts on Harness's episodes are sort of reflective of most people's opinions, in that I'm sort of, going into this episode, I was sort of 50-50 on him. I quite enjoyed his and Moffat's last collaboration, which was last series, two-parter, the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion. Uh, I really liked that episode for a lot of similar reasons to why I liked this one, which I'll go into momentarily, but I really did not care for Kill the Moon at all. And that was an episode that I thought was really so bad that it kind of soured me on Harness a lot. And it's an episode that, although I liked Zygon Inversion and Zygon Invasion, like, the specter of Kill the Moon's badness was so, like, all present that I was really hesitant to believe that the parts of that episode that I liked weren't just Moffat. But looking at the pyramid at the end of the world, I do think I can confidently say that Harness is now, like, he's in the green with me. I can say that I like Harness, that I will probably find myself looking forward to whatever it is he does next. But I don't know if it's just a matter of Harness is good at writing a very specific kind of episode, because what I liked a lot about Zygon Invasion and Zygon Inversion, and what I liked a lot about the Pyramid at the End of the World, is the political sort of vibe it has, in that it doesn't, Harnett stuff doesn't feel like any other Doctor Who episode, because he's really, he seems to enjoy going for the large scale political thriller sort of feel, and that is not something that you see a lot of other writers try to tackle on this show. And that's something that Series 10 has actually been really good with, even though I don't think that this series has been as hit for hit as something like Series 5 or maybe even Series 3 and 4 were. I do think that it's really been a return to form for this show, in terms of just every episode feels different, and they all feel unique, and it feels like we're really taking advantage of this show's premise again, of, like, we could really make an episode about anything, and we've been really taking advantage of that this series, I think, in my opinion, which is, like, we've had humans acting as, like, conduits for spacecrafts, and we've had, like, robots that see grief as plague. We've had, just with Extremis, what I found to be a really, like, if not creative on its surface, then a really creatively handled, like, alien invasion plot. And the Pyramid at the End of the World is continuing that trend, where it's sort of, on the surface, it sounds like the same basic plot structure of Harness's last story, which is that it's sort of an alien invasion thing. We're taking advantage of the Doctor as president of the world, as someone who's got a lot of influence, and over, like, armies and politicians and stuff. And it's just sort of him trying to hash out kind of a peaceful cohabitation between alien species, but here it's played really different. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. I guess I should start just by talking about that whole political angle and the Doctor as the president of the world, because that's something that is a holdover from Death in Heaven, the end of Series 8. And in Death in Heaven, it felt really forced and really weird and really pointless that we have this weird plot point where the Doctor is the president of the world. And I think that, in retrospect, that was Moffat looking forward to Capaldi's later seasons and sort of deciding that he was going to let Death in Heaven sort of suffer by having this sort of forced plot point that would then in the future be of, like, allow these kind of stories to happen. Because prior to Series 8, you would have alien invasion plots be generally the same, where even if it was a really creative spin on an alien invasion plot, like, say, The Power of Three or something, the general gist would be the Doctor and maybe Unit and companions would be on the ground level. They would sort of be circumventing the government or working completely independent of any governments, and, like, the political reaction to the aliens would always be background stuff. And if they weren't a problem, then they were just a footnote. And 12's era seems to be trying really hard to work against that. And the main way they've been doing that is by having the Doctor be president of the world, someone who's got a big sphere of influence, and someone who is not really on the front line so much, someone who's not... We're not playing him as an investigator or like a heroic figure necessarily. In these episodes, we're really playing him as like a politician or like a governing body. And I think it's really fascinating to see how this show and how these writers handle, like, having the main character be the voice of authority for once. The Doctor's not a rogue, he is the highest authority, and we're really playing with that, like, okay, how does the Doctor as governing body handle these problems? And I think, like, the way Harness handles it is always really fascinating. And, I don't know, it's something that makes what was a really ridiculous idea in Death in Heaven feel a bit more justified. And, I don't know how... It's a matter of, like, not just doing lip service to political ramifications of things, you know? But I suppose I should talk also a little bit about how this is different to the Zygon Inversion and Invasion, because Invasion and Inversion had a real, like, procedural sort of vibe. Like, the thing that made me enjoy Inversion a lot before we get to the famous speech, the, like, anti-war speech that the Doctor makes, what really carried me through a lot of that episode before we get to that point was just, I suppose you could say, the way it was structured. The fact that it really felt like nothing I'd ever seen before on this show. Where it was sort of like a 90s political action thriller movie, but with Doctor Who. And this episode is definitely not that. There are action elements, I guess, but this is really not an action-heavy episode. This is a real talky episode, and I like that quite a lot. It's really idea-focused. Again, it's like Extremis. I'm always really happy when this show can just take an idea that I've never seen before and just explore it. And we get that in this one, just like Extremis was sort of an idea I'd seen before, but done differently to anything I'd seen, where it was a virtual reality used to different ends than I'd ever seen a virtual reality used. Here we're doing a similar thing where, like, summing up in a sentence, this doesn't sound like the most original premise. Like, aliens arrive on Earth's doorstep, and they paint themselves as saviors, but they might actually be sort of unsavory and dangerous. And like that's not the most original idea, but what feels original to me about it in this episode is that, like, I've never seen aliens doing that in such a way where they've basically seen the future and they know how the end of the world is going to come about, basically. And so they show up, like, they use that as their excuse to come in and be like, hey, humanity, we know where you're headed, trust us to save you. And I really like the idea that they need consent, and that it can't be consent based in fear, it can't be consent based in strategy. It has to be, no, we really want them to take over. Because for a moment I actually think that the three, like, political leaders at the end of the episode, their plan is going to work because like they say, they're not coming from a place of fear, they're coming from a place of they want to compromise. The monks don't take compromise either, and I find that really interesting. Like, it's sort of a, like, a plussing type thing, where every time I think that I know where the episode is going, it it goes just a little bit further than I thought it would. Where first the old guy, the old Asian guy, he compromises first. I what I'm thinking is going to happen is, like, oh, some third party is going to make it so he doesn't surrender, or he doesn't have enough power to surrender, or the doctor is going to stop him. But then we learn that it has to be a genuine, not fear, surrender. And then the other three attempt it, and I'm thinking, okay, it's going to turn out that they do have fear, even though they say they don't. But that's not what happens. It turns out it can't be strategy either, because in any other story, I get the feeling you'd think that strategy, doing it for strategy, would be the key. But no, that's not how it works. It has to be, they need sentiment. And I don't know. It's a real interesting question. Why do these guys need that? What is it about them that they need to be welcomed explicitly with love? And I really hope that by the end of this arc, we find out why that is, and that that's not something that's left hanging. At this point, though, I trust this, like, multi-part story. I've liked these first two parts a lot. I trust Moffat and Harness to answer the questions that I have at this point, at least. And then when we get to the end, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place and I'm, like, getting ahead of myself, but I really like how that ends, and I really like the end of this episode. And because Bill, like, she sort of makes the same point that Nardole makes back at the end of Oxygen, which is that the world needs the world needs the Doctor in top form, and the Doctor being blind is sort of holding him back. He did a real good job of sort of, like, playing it off in this episode. Extremis sort of went overboard, where, like, every other line, I'm like, okay, how does no one not know that the Doctor is blind? He's acting like a person who can't see. This episode, outside of the one sequence where Nardole has to, like, narrate what's going on to him, the Doctor does a pretty good job of faking being able to see throughout this episode. And so I do buy that it comes as a shock to Bill when he reveals that. And she has genuine love for the Doctor, and that love is what the monks need to, like, solidify the deal. And, yeah, I feel like this episode is like sort of bold as an ending in the same way that Oxygen was bold, because I was hoping that we could take the Doctor being blind all the way to the end of Capaldi's run. It would have been a real sort of like, that's where I was expecting them to go. It would have been a real ballsy move. But I don't think that it's necessarily a cop-out that he can see again by the end of the episode, because that happens at the expense of Bill essentially giving away the autonomy of the planet. And what makes that really, like, feel really weighty to me is that we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how malevolent the monks are exactly. We don't know what their intent is. We don't know what they're going to use planet Earth for. And that actually leads to sort of the ending feeling more scary than if they just had some evil plan that we knew about. Because I don't know. Like, if we knew what the monks wanted with Earth by the end of the episode and Bill sold Earth over anyway, then it could be like, oh, well, we know what we're fighting next time. We can, like, infer over the course of the week how we're going to get out of it. No, we have no idea what's going to happen. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know anything going into next episode, and that is scarier than anything. And Bill has just given the planet over to people who are not malevolent or benevolent as far as we know, and that's frightening. And I don't know, it's just, I'm really excited to see where this episode goes. It has been a long time, I think, since, like, any episode, two-parters or, like, just standalone episodes have ended with, I am genuinely excited to see what the next episode is. And I think that Harness and Moffat have been really smart about giving us just in pieces what the monks want and what their MO is. Because, like, they're scary and Extremis because we don't know what they are until the very end. And then we find out, oh, they're invaders. And we don't know until the very end, or even past the end of this episode, okay, they've gotten what they wanted, what are they gonna do next? And it feels like I'm talking in circles, but I want to emphasize that, like, I don't think, because I know, like, viewing audiences, and the stuff I'm talking about is stuff that I don't trust that other people are going to pick up on and appreciate, so I really want to emphasize how much I appreciate, like, these aspects of the writing, like the vagueness of the threat going forward. And let's see, what else did I have in my notes? The monks themselves are played more for jump scares here, particularly the moment with the plane. And they are effectively scary, but they don't have, like, the same, I don't know if it's the direction or the pacing of Extremis, where I was just really uncomfortable through the majority of that episode. And it wasn't because of the monks, mostly it was because of, like, slowly finding out that it's a simulation and that the world isn't right and that there's something inherently frightening about that. But in this episode, the monks are just sort of scary-looking bad guys. And again, the fear factor comes from what we don't know. And so I like that for 2 consecutive episodes, we've taken the same bad guy and made them scary in different ways. Like, again, this is something that this show does, where recurring villains, whenever you show up, you know what you're in for. You know the brand of fear that's going to be sold to you. Here, like, 2 episodes, one after the other, we've got 2 very different types of horror conveyed with these same bad guys, and I like that. And I guess the one thing I can talk about is just talking about ideas, and the fact that they the fact that I love the idea of they know what's going to happen to, like, end the world, and that's when they decide to come in and save us. I like that it's a pathogen. I like the way that the Doctor figures it out. I like episodes where the Doctor's allowed to just be clever, and where it doesn't feel like the brand of clever that Stephen Moffat can occasionally get into, where he's congratulating himself on being clever. I like when we write the Doctor as a genuinely smart character, and he does things that I, as a member of the audience, can consider smart. And, like, the way that he figures out the pathogen, and the thing that he does with the cameras, like he boils it down to what facility it is by turning all the cameras off and seeing which one the monks turn back on. That was a really good sequence. And he and Nardole again is being real clever this episode. Like, I'm really digging the two of them as a double act. Like, I mentioned in Oxygen that I really like because we've got a real solid dynamic where I like the three of them together as a trio, and I like Nardole and Bill as a duo, and I like the Doctor and Bill as a duo, and I like the Doctor and Nardole as a duo. Like, there is no combination of these three characters that I find to be lacking. Like, put these three together in any sort of combo, and it's going to make for, I think, a really fun dynamic. And I think that speaks to how strong Nardole and Bill are as companions, that we have that. But I guess the one other thing that I wanted to mention on, like, the political end is that this show can occasionally be really immature with its politics. And I like that we're not doing that. I like that all of the political figures in this episode feel like mature, reasonable adults. Like, there's no crazy war general, like, archetype who's just chomping at the bit to argue with the Doctor over everything. No, we've got four, like, political leaders, plus the Doctor, plus Bill and Nardole over the course of this episode, and they're all really, like, believable, reasonable people. And it is so rare that you get that in, like, anything that features, like, governments or authority figures. Like, they're not even misguided. Like, when they make the decision to ultimately bargain with the aliens, I'm like, I gotta admit, I agree. Or, like, it's not what I would... I'm with Bill. I'm with Bill when she says I wouldn't do it if I had a choice, but I don't feel like we have a choice. And so when they go over to make to give power over to the monks, there's never a moment where I'm not sympathizing with them. And when they die, I actually have this moment of, oh man, I actually wish that all three of them could have made it out of this episode alive. All four of them even. And that, I feel like, is really smart writing, where we're not making anyone overly antagonistic just to have conflict, because so much of the episode is sitting in a room talking. And just so that people don't get bored, I can understand that it's, like, your instinct as a writer is to have the people sitting in a room talking get into conflict with each other, and this episode doesn't do that, and it works, I think. So, yeah, I really like this episode. Like, I was a bit iffy because I heard that people were bored with it, but I was iffy in the first act in terms of where it was going to go. But, like, once we get into the real talky parts, once all of the setup is done, I think this is a real strong episode. I don't know, like, I think taking this and Extremis together as a two-parter, I think they are the best of the series so far. I really hope that they stick the landing with whatever the next part is. 3 parts, possibly even 4 parts. I really hope that they stick the landing. I'm really liking how this arc is playing out, but at the same time, like, I wanna try again and try to get back to at least a couple more standalone episodes, a couple one and dones before the series is over. Because I don't know, like, I love when this show does one and done stories, and I think that with the track record of the series so far, I want to see more just unique concepts that get explored over the course of an episode. But I don't know, this multi-part episode is doing a real good job of taking an alien invasion story, something we've gotten so many times from this show, and making it really, what can we do so that every episode feels unique, that we're not just doing, oh, it's an alien invasion again. And I don't know, kudos to Moffat and kudos to Harness. They're really, they're on their A game with these past 2 episodes, I think. And I hope that the next episode can be as good, if not better. And that's it. I apologize, you guys. Like, I don't know, I got some comments on the last 2 videos saying that they preferred a more relaxed vlog type style of review as opposed to scripted stuff, but I just feel like this was really unstructured, and I want people to hear what I have to say about the episode, but I feel like I'm gonna lose a lot of people by stumbling over my words and my pauses, and I'm not in the position to edit those out. So, like, I don't know, if anyone is just, if I'm like putting anyone to sleep, then I'm sorry. It's just, I got a lot to say. I have a lot to say about these episodes, and I want to make sure that I articulate myself correctly. And I don't know, if I had the ability to, like, edit down and write a script, then I don't know, I feel like these would be better. But here's hoping that you weren't bored to tears listening to me, and here's hoping that the next one is a really good episode.